Hello everyone, my name is Katheryn Mahan. I am the Ecological Monitoring Program Manager at the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Restoration Institute. I've been asked to talk a little bit about forest and tree recovery from fire in the context of the Hermit's Peak and Calf Canyon fire. I am also a resident of Las Despensas, New Mexico. My family and I were also impacted by this fire. You can see the little black X in the Hermit's Peak fire perimeter. That's where our house was. That beautiful view of Hermit's Peak is just down the road from where we live. The photo on the left is my daughter and I working in the woods. And the photo there in the center is of my husband when we were building our house. My job at the Institute is in ecological monitoring. What we do in ecological monitoring is go out to locations around the state and assess vegetation health. Right now we have over 300 project areas. Those are the red in the map that cover over 63,000 acres. On those 300 project areas, we have nearly 2,400 monitoring plots, and we revisit those at regular intervals to learn what we can about how the vegetation is responding to mechanical treatments such as thinning, prescribed fire, wildfire, or other things that are happening. This is important for the adaptive management loop that you see in the diagram on the left. Adaptive management, most simply, is learning from experience. And the monitoring data that we're able to collect on these sites provide critical feedback to managers, whether they are private land, public, state land, tribal, whatever the management might be, to help make more informed, more effective management choices in the future. Some of the things that we monitor on the ground include canopy cover, understory cover, ground cover, the amount of surface fuels on the ground, and information about the stand structure of the forest. So things like how many trees are out there, how big they are, what species they are, their health, and their height above ground, which gives us information about fire behavior. The reason that we do this work is to better understand at the ground level the impact of treatments or wildfire. For example, you can see in these images pre-treatment, immediate post-treatment, and 5 years post-treatment. These were taken in the 2810 Las Vegas Watershed Collaborative Forest Restoration Program project, which is just above Las Despensas in the Santa Fe National Forest, near where the Hermit's Peak fire started. The black and white dots are some of our monitoring plots, and you can see at the larger scale what that treatment impact looks like, and then we'll zoom in and see what this looks like on the ground. So this is a pre-treatment image that was taken at one of our monitoring plots here. If you can keep your eye on that blue dot, now we're looking at 5 years post-treatment. So being able to quantify this change on the landscape and understand what it means for treatment effectiveness, health, and now in the context of this fire, for treatment effectiveness in the face of wildfire and climate change is really what I do at the Institute. So to talk about fire in our ecosystem, I want to make clear what ecosystems and forest types I'm talking about. This is imagery from May 21st, where the colors represent the different vegetative types that were burned in this fire. Some of the most common vegetative types that were impacted include the Ponderosa pine and what we call dry mixed conifer. So that's mostly what I will talk about when I'm talking about individual tree recovery as well as forest recovery. This is a graphic from our sister organization, the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute at CSU, and it was designed for Colorado, but it is helpful for thinking about New Mexico. What we know about fire in different forest types is that it behaves differently. We can look at the tree ring records to understand how fire historically moved through these forests, how often, how severe, that sort of thing. We know that in Ponderosa pine, fire moved through fairly frequently, as frequently as every 2 years to every 26 years or so. Ponderosa pine, you might notice, has fire-resistant bark, that really thick bark. It can be up to 3 inches thick. What you're looking at in this diagram is a 700-year fire history that was built in the Santa Fe Municipal Watershed by Ellis Margolis and partners. And each one of these little black ticks represents a fire that was recorded in the tree ring record. What we can see in that red box on the right is that in the last 100 to 150 years, there are a lot fewer ticks. There are a number of reasons for that, but a lot of the fire suppression policies that were put into place in the mid to late 1800s were very effective at changing the natural historic fire regime and limiting the number of fires that the trees in our forest saw. And we'll see in just a second what that means. This is another graphic from the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute. The important thing to look at here are those images there on the bottom. So in a historical fire regime, when the fire is coming through frequently, you might notice that the fire return interval in this graphic is a little bit different than what I just cited. The 2 to 26 year interval is coming out of some research that was done in New Mexico and Arizona. The information for this graphic that they prepared was in Colorado, but the same idea applies. It's just a little bit different with the numbers. So in the historic fire regime, you would have fire coming through frequently that would take out groups of smaller trees, and you would have those larger, mature, fire-resistant trees remaining to produce seed and drop that seed onto the bare soil, germinate new trees. What we've seen recently with the fire suppression policies is that when the fire doesn't come through, those smaller trees grow up, become mature. There are more trees in the forest, they're more densely packed, and when a fire comes through, there are ladder fuels that allow that fire to get up into the crown, to kill more of the forest, and to have more of a high severity impact on that forest. Same thing when we're looking at mixed conifer, which is when you start to see Douglas fir and Ponderosa pine growing together, typically a little bit higher elevation, not always. Going up towards Rosiata, Gascon, we see more of the Douglas fir, the dry mixed conifer. We know that from the tree ring records that dry mixed conifer had a historic fire regime of somewhere between 9 and 30 years, so a little bit less frequent than the Ponderosa pine forest type that we were just talking about, but still had a regular return interval. We know that the fire suppression policies that affected Ponderosa pine have also affected dry mixed conifer. And now when we have fire come through these systems, they are a lot more likely to be stand replacing or catastrophic fires, as you can see in that image on the right. If you take any one of these, put this information into Google, you will come up with the article. Many of them were written by my colleagues, and they were written in a way that they are accessible to folks who don't have a scientific background. They may not be the most fun to read, but they will be helpful. You will get something out of them. So any one of these, if you would like to follow up on for further reading, you can find them online. Lastly, I wanted to end with this. If you would like more information about the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Restoration Institute, these are several of the ways that you can contact us, follow us, and stay aware of what we're working on. Thank you.